It's time for the roar of the lion. So ever since the beginning of this year, I've been hearing the sound of a roaring lion. And it started at a conference that we were holding. I was just getting up to speak and I was just hearing the sound of a roaring lion. And basically there were two lions that I heard. I heard the lion of Satan. Satan roams around like a roaring lion, ready to devour. And I saw that this lion was going around and it was devouring people at the conference in their private lives and so forth. And I saw a switch of lions from the lion that devours switching to the lion of Judah. Then I heard the lion of Judah roaring. And that kind of resonated in my spirit. And then a couple of weeks later, we do, as a ministry, early morning prayer meetings. And specifically over, at the moment, we're doing on Fridays over Russia and China and Iran and international relations with prophetic intercession and prophetic declarations out over those nations. And we started praying for China and we started praying for the church in China. And during the prayer meeting, I suddenly heard the sound of a church in China, the underground church, the underground persecuted church. And I heard the sound of this church roaring like a lion. And it was deafening and it was frightening. And I paused, I stopped what I was doing. I paused praying because I heard this sound in the spirit of a roaring lion, and it took me back. And I was almost deafened and disturbed by the sound, the ferocity of the sound of the lion that was roaring out of the underground church in China. Then I was like, well, there's no wonder that this persecution against the church in China, the enemy wants to keep the church in China oppressed, because if that church in China was ever opened up, the whole world would hear it shaking. It was so loud, this lion roaring. And ever since then, I've been hearing the sounds of lion. I'm going to church, and I'm just standing there, and I'm hearing the sound of a lion roaring. And I think it's time for the lion to roar, for the church to catch the sound of the Lion of Judah, and it's time for the Lion of Judah to roar. It's time for the church to start roaring like a lion. It's time for the lion to wake up and start roaring in ferocity, in loudness. Now, the church is called to reflect heaven. It's called to reflect God. And Jesus, well, God is the Lion of Judah. And the church echoes the Lion of Judah. And I believe we're entering into a season where the church is echoing the sound of the roar of the Lion of Judah. But it's time for the church to start roaring in the spirit, to start roaring over the work of darkness, to start roaring over neighborhoods, to start roaring over the unsaved, to start roaring over sickness. It's time for the church to start roaring. And there's a deafening, I'm hearing it, it's so loud. And it's what also comes with it is that it's disturbing, because it's so loud, it's frightening. There's a ferocity in this roar. It's not just a timid roar. This is a loud roar. The church is starting to roar like a lion. And I believe it's time that the church is starting to move into a season where it is roaring like a lion. The Lion of Judah roaring over this nation. The Lion of Judah roaring over the church. The Lion of Judah roaring over cities, over your regions, over circumstances. It's time for the church to stand up and start catching the sound of the Lion of Judah roaring. But what sound do you want to be associated with? Do you want to be associated with the sound of the lion that devours? Do you want to be associated with a weak, timid church? Do you want to be associated with the sound of weak worship? Do you want to be associated with a sound of political correctness? Do you want to be associated with the sound of a meek little mouse? Or do you want to be associated with the sound of the Lion of Judah roaring and declaring in full power, in full strength, in full majesty, in full might, that makes things tremble, that makes darkness tremble, that makes situations of sickness tremble? So let's stand up, let's position ourselves to catch the sound out of heaven. And the sound of heaven at the moment is this lion. And I can hear it in my spirit. I can feel it. I can hear and feel the sound. The sound, you know, when there's a drum, a loud drum, or any loud music, and the sound vibrations, you can hear your body, sound vibrations echoing through your body. Or you've got a loud bit of music, things start to vibrate under the sound waves. Well, that's kind of what I'm hearing. It must be, I'm physically catching and feeling the sound waves, the vibrations of this roaring lion. And my body is shaking under the vibrations of the sound. In my spirit, I hear the sound. My body, it feels the sound. And it's time for the church to catch and feel the sound. It's physical. It's not just nice spiritual words. This is something physical that's getting released into the church. So position your church, position yourself to catch and feel the sound of the roar of the Lion of Judah. And a lot of the sound is for the church to grow into maturity. The roaring of the lion, it's calling the church to go into a deeper level of maturity. It's time for the church to start to mature. There's a maturing coming, I believe, to the body of Christ, where the church starts to mature, the church is starting to grow up, the church is starting to take responsibility for things it should have been taking responsibility for, in terms of warfare, intercession, in terms of power, evangelism, in terms of society being pulled off track. There's a maturity coming to the body of Christ, and some of it's being refined in fire. I think a lot of the church is struggling sometimes with persecution. Sometimes the church is struggling under the culture wars that's going on, and this is forcing the church to mature. And I think part of the roar of the lion is it's causing the church, it's causing the body of Christ to start to mature. So there's a maturity that's starting to come to the body of Christ. And the roar of the lion is part of that maturity, and it's part of calling the church to grow into maturity. And Jesus is going to come back for a bride without wrinkle, without blemish, a perfect bride. And this Lion of Judah, this lion roaring, is part of the church becoming more mature, ready to marry the bride groom. So I hope you found this helpful, and I'll talk to you next time.